Hello, everyone. Welcome to the We Shape podcast. Welcome back. Hey, guys.
Hello.
I was just joking with Tyler that he has this deal with me that he's not going to have caffeine unless he has a terrible night's sleep. And I can tell that you had a good night's sleep and caffeine. So I have extreme concerns for the podcast today.
We're just going to do what it does, you know?
Us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And by the way, it's not a podcast today.
No.
It's a pegcast.
We do have a very special guest today.
Okay.
That we'll introduce here in a second. I thought about, I don't know when I thought, a couple months ago when I asked her and I was like, oh my gosh, we got to have Dr. Peg on the podcast. And then she was like, sure, that'd be great. And I'm like, yes. So the day is here. It's finally come.
Christmas.
Yeah. So why don't we just, I don't know, do you guys have anything you want to catch up on, or we're good? Want to just jump right in?
I think we jump right in. I think Peg's going to have a lot of cool things to say, and I want to hear them. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Well, we
well,
got to set the stage.
Yeah, so Nina's going to read a little bio.
Okay. A tiny little bio.
I know.
I'm looking at
Tiny.
this bio. It's quite the bio, so
She's
let's
got
do
some
it.
accolades, you guys. All right, so we have Dr. Peg Capers with us, who's a doctor of chiropractic and has been in the world of human connection, healing, and interaction with self and others since the 90s. Beginning in the avenues of science and technology studies, she quickly changed her focus to humanity through studying and becoming a sign language interpreter, in which she holds a bachelor's degree from the University of New Hampshire. Communication and relationships between people and groups has always been a passion of hers, and moving into the connection and coherence between the body, mind, and more via the nervous system has become a natural evolution for her. Dr. Peg graduated from Life Chiropractic College West in 2006 and has been specializing in network spinal, somato-respiratory integration, and health and human evolution ever since. She served for a short time on Donald Epstein's staff, who is the founder of Network Spinal and other healing technologies, before moving on to delve more deeply into the somatic connection to liberation of all peoples and living systems. She practices at her office Evolve Wellness Studio in Santa Cruz, California, supporting people connecting, growing, and expanding their own relationship to health and body, as well as exploring the connection between the singular body and the collective body for individual, family, social, and global change and health.
I love it.
Ooh, that was a wonderful read, by
I
the
knew
way.
you were the right
That was
person for
great.
that. When I tried to read the last guest bio, I was like, yeah, Nina's got to do the bios from now on.
This is my moment.
I love
Okay,
it.
I love it.
All right, well, let's welcome Dr. Peg Capers.
Yo,
Come on over, Peg.
Welcome
And I'm
to
going
the
to take
show.
my
Pick
computer
your
back.
side. You can come on any side.
Come
We're
on
informal.
down.
Can
Any
I-
which way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That.
you probably need that.
Yes. Hello. We'll let her get settled.
All right.
Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning,
you.
Peg.
Great
How
to
are
be with
ya?
you all. I'm wonderful.
Good.
How about you all?
Good to hear.
Yeah.
We're so excited to have you. When we were doing the pre-production, I was telling Connor that I don't know how long I've been going to you, like over a couple years, because it was before the pandemic. I think I started.
I think that sounds right. Or
Yeah.
right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
And so I was just going to jump in and share. The funny thing about your work is people will ask me like, oh, what is it that she does? And I'm like, well, I don't really know. But the only thing I have been able to describe is that it feels like I'm going in for some sort of like kind of a little bit of like a unique chiropractic experience. It's not traditional chiropractic, but that it's like after I had done care with you for like 3 to 6 months, I felt like I did like 10 years of therapy. And I was like, wait a minute. You're telling me there's a connection between the mind and the body?
No way.
And it was like so wild. But I think I've told you this before. Like the first year I went to you, I then went and caught up with some people. And right away, one of the friends was like, you are so different and I don't know what's different about you. And I was like, I feel different. And he's like, oh, it shows. And then like even a few months ago, I went to another event where I hadn't seen people in a couple years. And they were like, one in particular came up to me and was like, you are so different. And like, you just have a different energy about you. And I was like, oh, Dr. Peg. And they're like, can I fly in and see her? And I was like, so I don't know. I feel like I'd like to start because I feel silly that I've done this work with you for 2 years, but I still can't come up with like an elevator pitch of what it is that you're doing.
Can I say just one more thing? Like personally, like Katie started going to you, and before that, I didn't see Katie dance all that much. Right?
Oh no, you're gonna bring
Yeah.
that up on
And
the
I know-
Early today.
and
I'm
I'm-
so curious. I want to hear.
And I'm someone who studies movement, right? And so I can see like when somebody's locked up and tight and things like that. And like after a handful of time going there, I just saw her whole body be able to move in a different way. I won't share
I'm
the specific
literally
story
turning red.
that I'm talking about.
I've
but,
never
like,
heard this story in the whole time that I've known you.
I was just like, where'd you learn to move your hips like that? Where did that come from?
Turning red.
So yeah, all right. Let's go back to the
Thanks, Tyler.
the summary.
We have stories for you today, Peg. This is a confessional
That's
now.
good.
I guess.
Yeah.
Wow. My privilege.
So
sweating.
what is
So
it that you did?
What is it that I do? Wow. I guess I made people dance. That's a good claim to fame, I think. I love this kind of intro because it pretty much is the thing that everybody says about, not just about me doing this work, but network spinal in general and approaching the nervous system this way. Is people are like, I don't know what you're doing, but things are changing.
It's working.
And I think, and I will say what I'm doing, but I think that's just really a testament to how much our brain and our body together via the nervous system are doing things that we have no idea that it's doing until it starts to do something differently. And we start to change, people start to notice that we change, our health can change, our personality can change. And, I can be really a big picture person, and I am inherently. But that's really, to me, the beauty of the work is people come into the office for all sorts of different reasons. Maybe because they really have something going on with their spine, and they think, oh, you're a chiropractor, you could help me with this. And I can, right? And so that can be the typical things one might think of. But then there's also, like, the nervous system not only regulates the structures and the musculature, but it regulates how we perceive life, how the experiences of our life have been organized in our body. Because the nervous system is about trying to get better at living life. And it will first choose how to survive, because that's the imperative that we're here, right? But I think most of us that are sitting here, or we can all appreciate as we move through life, that survival is hopefully something that we meet in the moment and increase that baseline. But that's not the joy of living. That's not the essence of people's being. That is like just the first step. And I don't say that lightly because that's also really essential, as we know, having gone through lots of different things in these past several years in Santa Cruz and the world. So that's the beginning, but I'm guessing you want me to say more, or what do you want me to say?
Let me just kind of I want to just kind of see if we can make this even simpler to understand,
please.
right? And so you talk a lot about the nervous system and how that organizes how you perceive the world. And so is it fair to say, and I know that black and white's probably not your favorite thing to do,
it is
but
not.
is it fair to say that, like, when we have a nervous system where we're really tight and we're fearful and things like that, that it expresses itself in our body and in the way we perceive the world? And when our nervous system is more adaptable and loose, that expresses its way in how we see the world. And one might be through a lens of, fear or survival, and another might be through the lens of something like possibility or something like that.
Sure.
Does that sound?
That's a beautiful way to say it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I first started seeing you, a couple months in. So the way I had experienced your work was that I didn't really know anything was going on, and then every 8 to 12 weeks, I would have these huge moments where I went, everything's different, and here's how it's different, and I would just know that it was your work. It was never like these incremental things for me. It was always like 2 or 3 months would go by, and I'd be like, whoa! I'd be like blasted with, look at the contrast.
It was incremental for me, though, on the other side.
It's different for everybody.
Progress.
But my point is, one of the kind of the way that I always thought about it is remember how I told you I had that dream one time where I went to the grocery store. I went to New Leaf, which is like a local health food store here. Doesn't have a million options, right? And in the dream, I was going to buy a razor. Well, if you go to New Leaf, they have 2 choices for razors, right? And when I went down the aisle, to my surprise, there was 1,000 different options for razors. And I have no idea why I felt like I needed to tell you that dream, but I did. And you're like, oh, how representative of the fact that your nervous system at one point thought that there was only 2 options. Because when you're in fight or flight, or when you're coming from a space of survival or safety, you don't stop and think about the possibility. You look at the 2 most important options in front of you. So what a cool indication that your nervous system is opening up to more possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had an amazing experience with Peg because we've all been lucky enough to work with her.
I'm literally looking around the room and I think Connor's gone to you a couple times. Ben's gone to you. Tyler's gone to you. Nina. I'm like, oh my God.
Just a testimonial to how much we love Peg, actually.
I was doing a lot of stuff at the time, and I was like, I don't know if it's like her or whatever. And I don't know, and everything. And then was it you two who looked at me like, you don't even look the same?
He was like, well, first of all, I said, after 3 or 6 months of going, I said, you have to go.
Yeah.
Or we're going to have some troubles. So like then you started going, and then you did come to Nina and I, and you're like, I don't really know. And like literally
convinced.
you didn't have the same hairstyle. You didn't have the same
You were wearing different
dress.
clothing.
Yeah, you like, we were like, oh yeah, really, nothing's changed. Anyway, go on, Nina.
Yeah, let's
What I was
hear
going to say is, I have been to a lot of chiropractors in the past. I have really bad jaw pain. Or had, I should say, because it hasn't ever come back. But I had this horrible jaw pain for the longest time. And like, I remember one time I let you put your like electrostim muscle thing like on my face.
Yeah.
And he's like electrocuting my face.
She's
I'm
like,
like, this isn't helping. Like, it's hurting more. And it's because like I clench my jaw while I sleep. You know, I had braces as a young person. I had TMJ, all the whole whatever. My jaw still clicks quite a bit. But I couldn't get relief. And it was constantly painful. And it would flare up. And then it would go away. And then it would flare up. And my dentist would say, well, don't chew gum. And, you know, whatever. And like try to, you know, relax before you go to bed. I'm like, cool. Like, that's really helpful. But I went to see Peg for the shortest period of time. I don't even think it was a month maybe. And I'm like, my jaw hurts, you know, and these other things are going on. She's like, cool, great. Well, we're going to do some other stuff. She didn't even touch my jaw ever. And I come back a couple weeks later and I'm like, Peg, like I sleep in a different position than I used to. Like I unconsciously lay differently. I used to always sleep like really curled up, like with my hands all tucked in and my neck
Protective.
pressed really, really downward and like a little fetal position. And like now I'm like splayed out across the bed. My poor husband's like, can you move? Like you're bumming me out. But it's so amazing is like that had nothing to do. I mean, I didn't think with my jaw, but I have not had, it's been years now, I have not had a single occurrence of jaw pain since. And I still sleep like a little floppy baby. So I don't know. It's very interesting how your work comes together.
It's just weird how we don't make the connection between the nervous system and the physical expression of what that means, and then the emotional expression of what that physical expression means. I mean, it's like we can all sit here and go, yeah, there's mind-body connection. Like we got it. And then it's like, no, you don't got it until you like embody what it feels like.
But I think people are getting it, you know, and this is something that one of my earliest mentors talked about to me was just how you perceive what it is that you're doing will allow you to do it easier or not, right? So he would always say, happy faces when you're doing something absolutely grueling, you know what I mean? And I talk about this with our community too, is how you feel on the inside is how you express your body on the outside. And if you're super tight up here, it's like, I think of carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. You know, if your shoulders are rounded forward, it's like guarding your heart and not expressing yourself. And I don't know, maybe you can speak to some more things that you see in your world and you know, I don't know.
Well, I think we have to I think we're getting really excited.
So many
We got
things
really
here.
excited.
We're really excited. I think we should share
Skirt.
like what the experience, because people are like, what are you guys talking about, right? So, you know, I'll just share, when you go in on the table, she's not doing manual adjustments. She's touching different points on your body. So maybe you could further explain sort of what your work is and maybe in the most, I don't know how simple we can be, but because I'm still, after years, trying to wrap my mind around it, but just maybe a little further explanation of the work that you're doing.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to back up a little bit. Yes. Okay, so everything you've all said is true around the connections there, right? And so what people do is they come in, they lay down, and I am looking what I think is very distinctly different than even other health practitioners or alternative practitioners. I'm really looking for, where is the body have rapport? Where is it saying yes? Just like when you meet somebody and instantly you connect, the chances are you're going to have a further connection and depth and maybe healing or, you know, possibility there, right? And so when somebody's laying down, after I've done an assessment and history and all that, every time I'm looking for, where is the body neurologically open for change?
And what do you see? Like, what are you looking for? Like relaxation, like?
That's a great question. And I think every practitioner is a little different, just to honor everybody has their own skill set. But what I think is the same between all of us who are doing this particular work is places along the spine that are in the cervical spine or the sacrum have a certain rapport. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. But that means when I even touch that area very lightly, the person may take a breath. You may actually see their spine sink into the table. You may see them move towards you. You may see them already start to dissipate tension or find their body more on the table. And it's through that connection that the connection keeps getting built somatically through the nervous system. So anytime we've had a place or a time of overwhelm or injury or stress, chronic stress is overwhelm, the nervous system neurologically disconnects from that experience to get through. So if we had an injury physically on our body, we may have had surgeries, we may have other interventions that have helped the structure be sustainable again, and we need to do those things at times. But that doesn't mean the connection between the brain and that part of the body is in a state of healing. It could still be in a state of protection. And so this lets the brain in a moment of safety, because rapport means there's already safety and connection there, start to reflect on how it is organizing the body from, am I holding the shoulder like this? Am I tightening the tissues there? That could be true about your gallbladder. That could be true about your ankle. I'm just using different examples. That could even be true on a cellular level. Under stress, cells shrink. That means the permeability is different. That means our health is different. So we could go many places, but I'm going to try to go back to simple, okay? Which is that just by finding that place and actually creating a very light force there, it lets the higher centers of the brain start to be able to find the whole body and begin to assess, like, hey, is this pattern I'm doing, this strategy that can be habitual, usually stems from a moment of a need for a survival response that gets us here, great. But replaying that survival response or organization keeps that part of the body or us from healing, from integrating, from growing. And so there's many ways that we could talk about that, but does that help to at least to start with what we're doing?
I'm going to try to take it simpler even.
Okay, great.
Is the feeling kind of you're looking at in a more macro view would be similar to, like, let's say somebody's feeling like they're having a rough day or whatever, and maybe their partner comes up and holds their hand, and I think everybody's had the experience of when somebody like holds their hand or says something nice to them, and their body goes like that. And you're looking at that on a micro level throughout every aspect of the nervous system.
Exactly.
Is that
yes.
Cool.
And to build more and more essentially files or references to that in the nervous system,
Right.
so that now, like, maybe there's that same place where we're like really tight, but now the nervous system has also the experience very physically of, oh, similar circumstances, but I have this other file of where I could relax into that, or I could feel more whole going into that. And that always changes the course of the events in the body and outside too.
Building repetitions of new decisions the body can
Because
make.
like okay, so let me see if I can understand. I feel like I'm a new patient. I'm not. But like, if you have an experience in your life that is even like a micro trauma or overly stressful situation, and especially if you're young, it's almost like your nervous system is getting wired to respond to that particular situation in that way, but then it kind of continues that pattern when it's not even applicable.
Correct.
And so then your work is sort of unwinding that and creating new pathways for reaction.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll give you a simple example in my own life. I got a knee surgery about 14 months ago, and up until literally a month ago, I could clearly feel the difference between my hip structures trying to support my knee and my ankle structures trying to support my knee. It was like my muscles were always really tight. And then it was finally like a month ago, I felt everything just go, And then, strangely enough, my whole nervous system felt more relaxed too. Like I just felt like everything felt like,
Well, it was funny because I had felt, I think, the emotional effects. But I see this acupuncturist. I see her pretty regularly, and I had gone in, and she said, "What are you doing outside of my care?" And I said, "Oh, I go to Dr. Peg Capers," and she was like, "Your spine physically looks different." So I'm like, it's like so crazy just to see that, like, my spine actually changed. And so what you're saying is a lot of this work is like, we're changing the structure so that way the nervous system can show up differently.
Yeah. And I want to actually go off on that a little bit if I can, is that, we're talking about how, so if we look at the nervous system, yes, it's the brain, it's the spinal cord, which is very essential, and then it's all the nerve roots that go to the whole body, okay? And when we look at things like structure, like people will be like, well, how can spinal curves change? Well, think about it. If your spinal cord is very tight and this is your posture and you try to lengthen and your body puts you back at this, how are the curves of your body going to be in what are an optimal state for the function of your body? If we go even deeper, there's likely a way that we have strategized to manage the world by perhaps shrinking. And again, I'm never going to make light of this. Maybe that's been a really essential thing to get through some very significant things that we want you to get through to be able to be here. But the overgeneralization of that becomes the posture. And then our curves look like that. And our personality fits that, right? Because let's just use a pleaser as an example. If I'm always saying, oh, yes, I'll do that, but internally, I don't want to do that at all. Do you think your body's going to be like this, or is it going to be like this?
I know nothing of what you speak of.
So this
Can't
is
relate.
where a nuance of how we have had protection in our body, survival. If we just look at this as brain and body development, we all develop as very different human beings with very similar, because we are human, developmental cycles. We have gaps in those. We have learning in them that the nervous system does not necessarily update. And to me, that's like the kindest way to look at people is like, nervous systems without that kind of support to grow and find ease and fill the gaps, because it's not that it's a never-ending process, but also the brain likes to learn, right? Likes new things. It wants to keep growing, so that it will try to get more and more whole and connected with that kind of support. And certainly, I'm just going to say there's lots of modalities that are really helpful. I really think this one, for me, is obviously a good fit around how I see the world and believe in the world, but also just really is about being in the timing of that person's healing, that person's body, because we can all want to get healthier faster or be more energized quicker, but that's not necessarily the rhythm of our body. So this is kind of integrating all these different things, the cycles and rhythms of the body, how that shows up in your posture, how that shows up in your personality and your decision. But very baseline, when people come into the office, we have to get the body more connected and harmonized to a sense of its own cycles and rhythms for other natural organic processes to emerge that are really congruent to that person.
You mentioned two things there that I would love if you could expand on
Sure.
them. One is, if we try to bring our body into this state and then it brings us right back. And I think that I would love for you to just touch on maybe traditional chiropractic. I don't want to be like a basher or anything here, but my own experience with traditional chiropractic, bone setting and force movement is it might be an interesting way to create mobility. And if you pair it with a lot of other things, maybe you can get out of those old patterns. But most people just go get their back cracked and then their body comes back to it. And 2 weeks later, they get their back cracked and their body comes back to it and they're just stuck in this cycle. Yeah. So I don't know if you can comment on that. And then
I think you just answered your own
yeah,
question.
I want you to comment on it. And I would love for you to comment on just
He wants you to say it.
stuckness in general. And I think that that's really important because I think a lot of people who listen to this feel they feel stuck. They feel like it's hard to make a change. And it is. But it's because I think they're thinking about it purely from a mind state and not from a physical state.
Right. I want to make sure I answer both of those questions because they're both great questions to answer. The first one I would say is, first of all, I am never a basher of any other techniques. I believe that different modalities suit different people, and I'm really an advocate of you find the ways that you can find into your body in ways that help you make changes within your body. Okay. So, and I do think that what you just mentioned, Tyler, around at least what my experience was of traditional chiropractic and why I chose this is that I'm really looking at if that pattern is repeating, so if you have that same segment, let's say, chiropractically reset again and again through an adjustment, through traditional chiropractic, one has to start to ask, in my opinion, why, if we value the brain and the body as this magnificent system, why is the system making that decision to reset you there? It must have its own importance in that. And so this network spinal is looking at how then is that organized that the body would put us in that position.
The root rather than the effect.
Yeah,
right?
And it's like, what is the perception of, oh my gosh, that's scary, And it's like, how are we valuing the information that the body is bringing us via the nervous system? And they're never different to me. So I'm just going to say those two things again. Body and the nervous system are the same to me. And, how then are we making more sustainable changes? And that's really why I chose this particular modality and why I like it. And also to say, a lot of people are really scared of having segments of their body adjusted in standard chiropractic. Yeah. And that is also then looking at how are we using forces? And I think this is something I'm very fascinated about in the world. How are we using forces for change? That rapport and force with has a different kind of way of creating a cascade of change than a force against something to break through. And I think that if we just kind of look at the world as the whole, we have a lot of messages that more force equals more change. Yeah. And that's just really not the case. And this is looking at how is the right timing of a force in congruence and harmony with a system, allowing new changes to sustain.
How do we change more easily, right?
Yeah, basically.
I know I'm a victim of like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And
Yeah.
then I go back and reflect on my life and I go, oh yeah, most of the stuff that was really great, I was being pulled.
Sure.
It was smooth, it was
Yeah.
flowy, it wasn't pushing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and also just like, what's the timing of that for you? You know, I'm somebody that's, you know, done a lot of physical activity. I really value that. I'm also somebody that I like to just chill out and do nothing. You know, what's the dance of like, you know, what that's important around rest and relaxation is nourishing. When have I overtrained and that hurt myself? When did that, you know, 3 weeks off of not running, when I came back, wow, I was running faster. Like, how are we, without it being like, I have to do it this way, in relationship with how the cycles of our body help build those things? Because sometimes not working out for a bit or not exercising that way is actually a great gift for us to discover another way our body actually wants to motivate. You know?
Well, I think I've shared this example maybe more than once on the podcast, but I've always been fascinated with the research about how people, like they did a research study on how many ways there were to do dishes.
I don't know this study.
And I think, I can't remember the number, but it was over 240, I think. And like, I'll just tell you, when I came to you, I knew two of those ways, right? Because my nervous system was mostly in fight or flight. It was in protective gear. It was like, we're going to force things. And a lot of the way I show up now in the world is a lot more like, don't force that. Or it's a lot more connection with my mind and body so that I can look within to make decisions versus like looking outside of me. And it's like that razor dream, right? I like went from just a couple possibilities to a lot more possibilities.
Yeah.
And it was funny, I think a number of months ago I came to you, because I go to you twice a week. Appointments are 20 minutes each. And I said, I want to do an experiment. And you said, what's that? I said, I want to come to you 4 days a week. And you said, okay. So I did, every time I'm surprised, right? I go my thing where I go 3 months and then I get a huge like, whoa, look at all that stuff that just happened. And I'm surprised every time by it, even though I'm conscious of it. So I was going, and then after like, I think 2.5 months, you were like, let me know if you need to slow down. And I hadn't considered that you could actually have too much of this work. And then I looked back and I was like, damn, the last 10 weeks have been kind of intense. Like, just in my own mind and how I was perceiving the world. Because when you do this work and you are creating more safety in the nervous system and I think about it as like rewiring, it changes how you look at the world. And when you change how you look at the world, it's kind of intense for your mind, because you're like, I used to believe that and now I don't believe that, right? The level of attachment that we have to beliefs is insane. And I have had therapy for years, and I still go. I believe in that modality as well. But when my body got to be in the driver's seat a little bit more than my mind, I never would have thought that could change my belief systems, but it did. It continuously changes my belief systems. Like, I don't even believe in one option solution for anything. Like, even when there's stuff going on in our business and Tyler's like, oh, what about this? What about that? And I'm like, well, if there's 240 ways to do the dishes, we have infinite ways that we can solve problems. And like, what a freeing experience. I literally feel like I force like at least 75% less stuff in my life. I kind of am like, oh, that didn't work out. That's just great. You know, like to think that I have the one belief that has all the, like, that's insane. But we get so stuck in that and we get so rigid in that. And that, I always think of your work as unwinding. I'm unwinding all of these things. And I do have to like always make everybody laugh. You know this about our daughter, but our 9-year-old daughter is obsessed with you, and I always find it interesting.
Didn't she call her hero the other day?
She did.
Oh my god.
Peg was having
Don't
an
embarrass me.
Peg was
She does all the
having
treatments at home. It's so
she
cute.
sets up
We'll
treatment
get you a medal
station.
for the wall in there.
But like Peg was having an event, and we had just come off of a sickness, and she's like, oh, are you going to come by? And I was like, I'm going to see if we can. It's at the dinner hour. We're all kind of exhausted, but I'll see if we can make it. I'd love to. And then Ellie overheard me, and she's like, wait, what's going on at Peg's office tonight? And I said, well, sweetie, I don't know. We're going to check in with Papa and see if, she goes, we are absolutely going. And I said, well, sweetie, we were just kind of coming off a sickness. Let me check in. She goes, Mom, you don't understand. Peg is my hero, and we are going. And then we like brought her, and she was the only kid, and she was like fully participating in all the questions and discussion. But anyway, I find it fascinating because when adults go in with that nervous system of like, okay, you can fix my back, but you're not going to change my belief systems, right? Kids are not like that. So I always find it fascinating how kids respond to this kind of work because they're so much more open. They don't have as many life experiences to shape the nervous system in that way. And she one time in the car, she said, "Mom, I need you to have a discussion with Peg for me today." And I said, "Okay, well, maybe you could talk to her, but like, what do you need me to say?" And she goes, "I just feel like I'm really ready to go deeper in my work with her." And I said, "I think Peg's available for that comment, so why don't you talk to her?" But I just find it fascinating because kids don't have that lens. They're not like jaded to the world. Do you know what I mean? It's like I look at it in a way of like she's eating it up. She's like, no, this resonates with how I feel like I should feel in the world. And I see all the conditioning that's trying to happen around me. And this feels so true to me. And so she's like, you're like a magnet for her.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's the only appointment I take her to where she's never says I don't want to go.
That's true.
And she, back when we got off the table later, she goes, "Did I get a longer treatment today? Do you get the longest ones? How long can I go?" I'm like, "Oh my God, Ellie." But anyway, it's always fascinating to watch kids in that because they don't have as many life experiences that create as many of those neurological responses.
I mean,
So
in a lot of ways, is that what we're trying to do is kind of rewind and like let those traumatic memories that keep us stuck, like let them go and bring us back to that baseline of openness and freedom and
Yeah. I mean, I think in many ways it's like letting that's the thing. It's like, we're not in a time machine, but in many ways the nervous system can go back and rewire or reconsider how it organized around an experience because it time capsules things. If we're like at the highest moment of our love life and we get into a bike accident, now those things might be paired where somehow the nervous system is making them one. We fall in love again and then we get the same symptoms that we did from the bike accident. Isn't that kind of curious?
Yeah.
When we're like, wait, everything's going well. Why would my body be doing this? So yes, it's again, I think, I do think trauma and overwhelm and all those things are important things to speak to. And it's also just to acknowledge that life circumstances, what we might call the best and what we might call the worst, all have developmental gaps in what humans learn in their nervous system, where they learn to be safe, where they learn to be seen, where they learn to be able to express themselves. And so it's kind of why the work doesn't really have an end, because the nervous system doesn't have an end to its learning, and it can get more specific. And I think that any moment, you kind of said it around the dishes thing. I love that analogy. You never told me that. But, anytime the body has any kind of fight or flight in it, it is in that duality of one or the other. It's also using lower brain centers. So let's just imagine that this one little area in my shoulder is in that kind of fight or flight mechanism that may be informing other ways that I think. So every little part that gets to reclaim like a larger range contributes to the whole of us starting to use more higher brain function. And that, if we're not to go totally into neuroscience and stuff, that's what most people are seeking when they're looking for, insights in meditation. And we're looking for, frontal cortex, dual hemispheric function. And that's what this is saying is like any place that there's a division, that's a distraction to that from the body. Now, yes, I love what you're speaking to, Katie, where it's like, I didn't expect that having my body make this different would change my mind. Isn't that beautiful? Because so much of us tries, at least I think culturally, I think we're moving from this a little bit, mind over body. And if I just think happy thoughts, I have like those experiences in my body. And to some degree, that's true, right? That's something, but why not work it both directions? Yeah. Because if you're always having to overcome the responses of your body, that's a heck of a lot of effort. Yeah. And that is a lot of managing. And that also has value. And if we're to look at the baseline of what's happening and have that change, how could even quote the, constructive life choices that you're making actually have greater impact? So it's not always just about like fixing what's not working and rewiring the traumas, which it also is phenomenal at that. But you could have really nothing that you're currently aware of that needs assistance with in your life. And I would wager that you would probably still have changes that made your life more rich
because you're not
of living it.
Aware of it.
Exactly.
So like that was the other thing that happened. When I first started going, one of the first, like after like that 3 month, I started to relive all of the major life decisions I made in my mind through a different lens. And I went, oh, that's conditioning. Oh, that was conditioning. Oh, that was conditioning. And I was like, I could actually feel in my body how I had made choices in my life based out of what my mind and body were responding to at that time, and how I don't even look at it the same way anymore. And I didn't know that there was another possibility. Like even in our company, I had run operations for 7 years. And then my good friend came to me one day and said, why do you run operations? And because she was doing, it was Amy, she was doing some consulting work for our product. And I said, well, because that's what they needed me to do. And she said, but I know you're good at that, but like, do you like it? And I'm like, it never dawned on me. And then I went, no, I don't. And then she said, you're a product person, Katie. You need to work on the product. Or you're more like, need to actually work on the more vision of the company. And I went, I didn't know that was an option. And then I rewound everything. And I was like, oh, I chose that major out of conditioning. I chose that career out of conditioning. I chose, and had I not had that work, I just would have been like, yeah, that's what I chose.
In the interest of this podcast being entertaining, I would like to share the real story that happened there.
Why am I in the spotlight?
And prior to those conversations that Katie had, she was dancing. She was listening to music and dancing after her kids went to bed. And I was like, oh, this is fun. You're dancing. And she had a big smile on her face. And then she went, and her face turned into a frown. And she went, oh, and I like caught her. She like started to fall.
I fell down.
And I was like, what the heck? And I put her down and she was just like started crying. And I was like, what is going on? And she's like, I never liked doing all this operational stuff. I just did it because I was good at it. And people told me I was good at it.
I would argue that I wasn't even that great at it.
You're great at it.
But I very organized. But it was like, it's kind of like some of the work that you do makes me feel like my body has been given permission to be my true, authentic self. And when I look through the lens of the choices that I made in the past, they were my reaction to my conditioning, to my micro traumas, to my life events, to my generational stuff, right? They were just responses to those. And your work allowed a little bit of a like, oops, pause. Let's reevaluate that, and let's let you have a feeling of how you feel most authentically, and then you're going to re-look at those things. And so sometimes I even warn people to not be discouraged when they start this work, because you do get a little bit like, the overwhelm's not the right word, but you kind of get a little bit like
grumpy,
disenchanted.
A little bit, you do. And I remember one of our other friends had joined, and then we went out to dinner with him, and he was like, and he had been seeing you for right about 10 weeks. I just am really struggling with some of this stuff from my childhood, and I don't know why all this stuff is coming in. And I was like, just don't even mention Peg, because he's not going to believe us anyway. So like, I just was like, let him go through his process. And I knew he would come out of it. And he kept seeing you. And then sure enough, a couple months later, he just was more him. But you do have to have this moment in time, at least in my experience, where I went, oh my God, all those years I made choices that were not from me. And now I am, and I can feel the contrast, and it's a very heavy feeling.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
So it's very clear, I think, to the audience that you're, Katie, you love this work. I think that we've repped Peg really quite a bit. I think people maybe have a general understanding. I think it's really useful to go to like the bigger picture. Like everybody can have that experience of having a trauma and their body tightening up. But if you think about that on a micro level, every little thing making decisions, that's helpful to understand the work. Yeah. So somebody's listening to this and they're like, wow, that's really interesting. Maybe they can't come see you or another practitioner. Like, how do people start to
they could
be
probably
aware
look up a practitioner
of this? They could, but like let's just say they're in their house. How do they become aware of this in themselves? And then is there anything they can do to start trying to reorganize the way that their nervous system reacts?
Yes. I mean, I think, I want to go back to something that you said, but I don't. Can we do both things? Can
sure.
we? I'm not sure which one to go first.
Yeah.
No, you have to do mine first.
No, we don't.
I'm just kidding.
But will you hold that question so I can come back to
it.
that? Because you were talking about that moment of sort of feeling disenchanted, and I think that's so important because, saying like moving through pain is never kind of I'm just going to say it this way, like a sexy selling point, right? But there is no liberation if we can't actually move through that, because the illusion of what seems like cheery or it's working that isn't really working for us, but we get rewarded for. So on the surface, isn't really sustainable for anybody's health or well-being, okay? And so at least, in my experience, doing this for the past 16 years or so, it's like people have a way that their nervous system shows them that life can't sustain that way. Sometimes it's something very physical. Sometimes it's something very emotional. Sometimes it's a construct of like, I am just not that person anymore, which is its own pain, okay? But this is where I'm going back to being able, the nervous system in part keeps us from that, because in survival or in any of these other kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Disconnected parts, like the way the body has schismed itself from each other, there's no actual wholeness to even like move through that. Like the gentle hug from somebody else, it's like our body isn't able to do that for us, or our body starts to go this way and another part goes, no, don't go there, we're not ready yet. And to be in the timing of that is important, but to actually move through that process and have resources to be with challenging moments so that we can learn about ourselves from that, that is a huge amount of influence on how we can navigate the world, not just our bodies, which is so important, but just even like you're saying, like, well, then what does that mean about who I am in the world? Like, do I want to run operations? Like, does my body actually feel any kind of sense of energy from that or excitement? Or is it just like, am I being robotic checking off the list? I tell people, and I don't have to say it here, but part of the reason that I came to this work as somebody who was a client in somebody's office is because on paper, my life looked like you're doing all the right things. You're successful with this, blah, blah, blah. And I woke up in an excruciating amount of pain so randomly one day. But that changed the complete course of my life. Okay. So just to say, like, when we're like, oh, pain, and, I think there's a lot of avoidance of things that are uncomfortable. I don't want to just call it pain, but that's actually often where the healing happens. And then the healing happens in other ways that feel more freeing. But what's wrapped up in the like disconnect is actually kind of the fuel for that change, really.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that because I think that, me too, it's like people want to avoid the hard things. And I'm not saying we have to be in the hard things all the time, okay? But again, that right time, right amount of attention, right amount of presence from your body lets that be a whole different way of being in relationship with people in your body and the world. So I wanted to say that.
Just to comment on that, I think, like, to me, the vision I've always had of that, and we say this a lot, is that growth is challenging. It's not always easy. It's not a straight line, right? But like, I think of like walking up to the wall, and the wall is made of fire, and you're like, oh crap, I don't want to go through that door. I don't want to go through that wall. And you open the door and you go through it, and it hurts a little bit, and you get to the other side, and you're like, oh, this is so much better. And then you go for a little while and you're like, this is wonderful. And then there's a bigger wall of fire and you're like, oh, and you can just keep on that journey forever. Well, but so many people just turn around the moment they see something that's challenging or difficult or fearful.
And that's where the safety in the body becomes the way that you can navigate that challenge differently. That it does not actually the challenge itself, if that makes sense. It's like coming from other nuanced ways where we'd be like, why would being on my table create any change in that when you came in for, not you, but like one might come in for like a headache and then suddenly they're facing challenges differently in their life. There's a relationship between those things, but we can't see it until it's changed because we can only kind of perceive ourselves as we are now often,
and
from that standpoint.
I don't know how you feel about sharing this, Nina, but even when you went into to PEG, I don't remember you. I know you went in and your jaw situation was, but that wasn't.
That wasn't the real reason.
Oh, I was waiting for this to come up.
I mean,
another testimonial drop.
Well, no, but like it wasn't the reason. You were going through a really hard time in your life, and I was like, I don't know how to support you in this, but I have this recommendation because I feel like that's what it is. It's like, when you're faced with something that's really hard that can create the opportunity for growth, it's like PEG's work allows the body to feel okay with that a little bit. Do you know what I mean? It's like it allows the body to say, we're going to go through this even though it feels hard, and there's like a little bit of safety in it. And so I don't know how comfortable you feel.
I do. I would love to share about this. I think that that's such an important thing. And I think the word you continue using is integrate. And like to be able to take a great challenge or a great emotional pain and integrate it into your life rather than go like, I can't deal with that. I'm shutting the door. I'm stuffing it down or whatever. And like be like, not welcoming it in, but allowing it to exist and allowing yourself to be with it. I was going, when I met Peg, I was going through an exceptionally, like, I really want to call it like existential crisis. I had been, young and dating and having relationships, and I had been in a very long-term relationship at one point that I thought would end in marriage, and it didn't. And I had walked away from that, and I was like in significant emotional pain around it. And then I was like, well, I'm going to do it again different. I'm going to try and show up differently in the world and get these things I wanted. I wanted marriage and children and like to grow in that and have a relationship that was really valuable. And I had dated again, and it had totally not worked, right? Like, and I was like, shit, like I had this moment where I said, wow, like this might not be the path that life has laid out for me. This thing I thought I wanted that I really like had been kind of hung up on, like this is my goal, was like not appearing in front of me. And I was like experiencing, like I said, existential pain around it. Like my life's not going to go the way I freaking thought. And like, how do I deal with that? It wasn't like the breakup was really, I mean, yes, I cared about the person, whatever, we broke up, but that was like a normal level. It was like this deep emotional pain of like, I'm not going to have what I thought I wanted. This is not going to be the life I'm going to live. And how do I deal with that? And I was like sobbing every day for like 7 weeks. Like I was in so much physical pain and emotional pain. And when I met Peg, I went in and I shared that with her, and I shared some other things, again, physical things. The intake is very, detailed. And you're like, let's work on that, let's work on this together. And my life has changed so much. And what I would say most specifically about that is that I allow my body to inform my decisions today.
Yes.
I allow like that information that's very, 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 very quiet from my body be like sometimes my body's like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, I don't know why you said that, but okay, girl.
Yeah.
Like, and after meeting Peg and working with her for the period of time I worked with her, I had relief from physical pain, and I had not necessarily like, oh, okay, I just like, moved on with my life and whatever, I was perfect. But like, I was able to be okay with what was happening and feel peace about what was happening and like experience joy again and be like, I'm going to be just like, okay, I'm going to be fine. And then funnily enough, not so long after that, my life changed in a lot of really positive ways.
Well, it was funny. I look at it, as being someone from the outside in, it's like anytime you're in your own life, the patterns that you participate in over and over and over again aren't as obvious to you. And it was like the pattern was a certain type of partner.
Yeah.
And I think I watched you try to will a different way,
but force.
It was the same partner, just in a different package.
Oh yeah.
And then,
force meet object.
Yeah. And then it was like, okay, well it's not working. And I didn't want to like ever assure you that I didn't know. I'm like, girl, I don't know the plan for your life, but I can see you're in significant distress. And so I feel like Peg could offer you a pattern interrupt. She could offer you a pattern interrupt. And I'll never forget when you told me you first went to her, that you told her, speaking of the body giving the mind information, you told her, well, I easily cry a lot. So like, I don't know how. Oh, yeah. And you were like, you said that Peg said, well, I'm absolutely not going to turn that off.
I was like
I'm actually,
help me.
and she
I
was
cry
like,
all the time.
She was like, I'm actually trying to get people to do that because that's information for people that they don't want to face.
I have a lot of big feelings, you guys.
Yeah. So anyway, I just was hoping you would share that because you did, and then you had a major pattern interrupt.
I did.
Yeah, and I watched a lot of like, I can have this if I want it. I can be me.
Her ability to feel like she deserves something.
Yes.
Changed. It was really cool to watch. Oh, I don't just want something, and I'm not gonna like prioritize myself. It's like I deserve this.
Yeah.
And things changed.
That energy that you have inside attracts and emits and attracts different people. So I watched the pattern interrupt happen in me and in you and in Tyler and in everyone who goes. But it was really profound to watch how like such a significant pattern in your life that had really been modeled for you for your whole life just kind of changed. And then it was
quickly
like
at that.
Yeah, it really did. And I had curiosity, like, I always had wondered if you had pretty significant rapid change because you did have such access to your feelings. And so you did have more informational inputs that you could sort of direct you in that way. So
I do remember when Peg did a 3-month check-in kind of thing you do. And you're like, okay, I'm available for questions. Like, what's going on with you? What can we talk about? And I was like, I don't have any questions. She's like, you don't want to know what I'm doing or why? And I was like, no, I don't have any questions. Just keep doing it.
But it's fascinating.
I love
a
that
beautiful
too. That's
thing.
a nice thing too. I love questions, and I also love when people don't have to understand because the experience makes it real.
That was exactly it. Like, I was informed by the experience. I'm like, I'm feeling all the stuff. I don't need to even understand why.
And like, I have always been curious because, so the founder of this work, his name's Donnie Epstein, right?
Yeah.
I feel like he's not really out there that much. And I have curiosity, like, I mean, maybe I'm just not on the internet enough, but, you know, I wonder because when I first heard about this work and I was looking up, it is kind of interesting. Like sometimes people's bodies really move on the table. It doesn't fit the traditional construct of what we think we should do with our bodies. And so I don't know, like, so maybe you can speak to kind of, it's fascinating to me that the founder of this work, like this is relatively new work. So I don't know.
Since the 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, his Donald Epstein, you can look at his website is Epienergetics. And it is, you know, I think there's lots. He is out there. He does lots of transformational programs. He doesn't teach doctors as much at this point directly, but there's other staff that teaches doctors to do this work, and he does more transformational kind of work and programs that way. But wait, what's your question again?
Just like, well, it's anytime something's relatively new. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I just have curiosity, like, how did you find him? And like, his work is very unique.
Yeah, it is. It's both unique, and I also think it's more present than people know. Okay. One of the things I really just love, when I found this work, the chiropractor that I went to see in New Hampshire, Dr. Deb Eyre, who is also my great friend, has been my mentor, you know, it really immediately to me was resonant to how I felt and saw the world, but I almost didn't even know that. Okay. And so anyway, he's been around doing the work for, I mean, since the 80s, and he was really looking at what your question was, Tyler, like, why are these patterns up? Like, what's actually happening for the person? If I'm just going to adjust the atlas and this pattern comes back, what if we trust life and think that life is bringing us things that the nervous system needs to grow and integrate from, rather than, I don't want that, this shouldn't happen. If we can flip that a little bit, how does the nervous system start to learn from those, right? And repattern. And so he was like, what's the least amount of force that can create the most amount of change in the nervous system? Because if you're really looking at the nervous system in its optimal state, it is to integrate. It is to have multiple perspectives. It is to like see humanity and see the self at the same time. It has all of that capacity. And so he was like, okay, when people are having this, like, you know, let's just even say gastritis, like what's happening in your life? He was really bringing in that your body isn't separate from your life, that the environment of your body is not only just responding to environmental things internally, but externally, right? And we can see that more and more in the world, how true that is and how necessary it is to look at that. So he began to develop the technique, and, you know, it's gone through various iterations. He's gone from teaching, you know, thousands of doctors to, again, being more on the transformational side. And it is really different work. And I say that to people, like, I do something different very intentionally, you know, because what brought me into that particular chiropractor's office was actually having not really been met by any healthcare professional up until that moment. And I was in my late 20s. I was like 29. And I went in there because I had back pain that came out of nowhere on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, funnily enough.
And prior to that moment, I was a kid that grew up with allergies, asthma, stomach problems, headaches, everything under the sun that nobody could ever touch. There was no reason. They couldn't find a reason for that, right? And so I really lived and managed all of those things up until that moment where I went in because this back pain, and then my allergies started changing. And I really, this is going to sound funny, but you all have pretty much made this seem like a more real statement. I honestly came alive. And I was like 29. Like, what was I doing for those other 29 years?
Yeah.
You know, and I was working. I was doing lots of things. You know, it wasn't, you know, and yeah, I wasn't really feeling energized by things. So I was very athletic as a kid. I hadn't done any of that in my 20s. And because I like to exercise. Sometimes people are like, oh, I have to exercise. That's never been me. It's like, I like to be outside. I like to run around. I'll kind of do anything, okay? Like just to have that experience in my body. And so I started doing that again, not because she told me, go exercise. I started changing my diet. I changed my relationship. I changed how I was working. I started changing all these things because, to your point, you know, actually everybody, it's like suddenly it was like my body was more the compass of, it's not that everything sucked. It's just like even the nuance of like, yeah, I love this particular career I'm in as a sign language interpreter, but I want to freelance versus work for an agency. You know, so sometimes it's just like small things like that. You know, it's but this is really where I think the biggest value of this work, and you've all again spoke to it in various ways, is finding the authentic expression of that person's nervous system. Okay. And so back to your thing about Donald Epstein, it's like if you look at some of the videos, and please do if you're interested in that, around how it looks in people's bodies, some people move a huge amount on the table. You'll see rhythmic waves that are actually showing us neurological connections and integration that are really essential. Not everybody moves that way, because that's not how they are. Just like people dance differently, right? People emote differently. Some people have kind of a natural way that their system is organized around, that the conditioning of family, culture, world has shifted how we express that. And that impacts our health, that impacts how we move in the world, what we do in the world, and how we think. And so when you look at some of these things, I would say it's true. You know, the room I work in is an open environment. And even just the other day, I was having a conversation with somebody. That is intentional. Not so it's easier for me, but what your body is available to do and find ease and expression in the presence of others actually means it's probably more sustainable for you.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And what comes up for you in the presence of others to have a contact, to find ease and find integration, is also a drop in the bucket of growth that, like, you know, again, that thing that we avoid is sometimes what becomes very present in the room, in the office, because it's meant to be a slice of life.
Well, one of the things that always has come up for me in this work is that it doesn't just stop with me, because the more I can access me and the more permission I have to feel safe in the world and have infinite possibility, the more I can actually accept other as well. So this work is not just work for, that's why I find it so profound, is because it's not just work that goes on in my own body, because the things that happen in my, to think that there's disconnection from self and other is just insane. We are all connected. And so when I accept myself more, I actually have more acceptance for other as well. So it really is meaningful work. And
I'm not going to end this podcast until I get my question answered.
Okay, go
Don't you try to
ahead.
wrap this
Go
up. I hear
ahead.
that tone.
Here we go.
No, I think this is great. I think people understand the concepts, but I would love for people who are listening to this just to get something they could try.
Yes.
Right? Like just
Yes,
give something that they could actionalize and see if it's useful. I mean, they can look up the work and all this stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. So yes, back to that. So what I would say is I think one of the most accessible things to offer people is to look at somatorespiratory integration. And that is, again, comes out of Donald Epstein's work. There's workbooks on it. And why I'm saying this is it actually acknowledges the same rhythms and developments of the nervous system through safety and growth and transformation and expansion as having entrainments or coming into a network practitioner's office. There are also network practitioners all over the world. If that's something somebody's interested in, there's avenues to look that up. But if we're just directly looking at how can a person connect more with this part of their nervous system, I'll tell you right now, it always is about touch. And it is about breath or about energy and movement. And it's different combinations for people. But so often people don't even feel comfortable touching their body. And I just even mean like the front of your body. There's some practices that I do with people when we get to the belly button or the belly area. Almost everybody doesn't want to touch that part of their body.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm just saying, if there's places like if you've, hurt an area and now you just manage it and never touch it, putting your hands there, just like finding a moment of presence with that. There's so many ways you could go with that, but if you really want like a small takeaway, it's like finding where there's ease in your body, if you can find that place, because it's maybe not the place that's injured or stressed, and spend more time there to help your body regulate, find connection neurologically, and integrate. And then if you need to touch that injured area, go there for a shorter amount of time and then return to the place where there is ease and connection. That's what all of the work is that I'm doing. That's what the somatorespiratory integration also offers. But that's just a very simple way is we spend more time in the distress when we have places of organization, ease, and safety in our body that are really the asset to connecting those two.
So if I were to put that into action right now, like maybe I'm sitting there, I close my eyes, and I kind of find a spot in my body that feels really connected and relaxed and ease, right? Like at ease. And I kind of just sit in that feeling and I go, oh, that feels really wonderful. And then I go to a spot that feels kind of tight and whatnot, and I kind of become aware of that too, and just the difference between the two. I go back to the ease, and then I just move on with my day.
Exactly.
Is that right? Beautiful. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about, in our WeShape community, we have been talking about 4 different pillars. It's not just about join our community and do our exercise product. It's so much more than that. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. We have like 4 pillars of intention. So like, don't join our product to like just have a number on the scale, right? Figure out what your intention is and go as deep as you can with that. And then the movement, because we do really believe that like movement is so important, and our product is really rooted in functional movement patterns, biomechanics, not just do this cardio thing and burn this many calories. And then community, because we do believe that connection is also extremely healing. And anytime you're joining a community that's kind of against the grain, right? There's not many products out there that are like, don't lose weight and just connect with yourself. Right. So the community supports that. And then the 4th thing we talk about is beliefs, because we have been conditioned to believe all of these things. And I think that when you integrate the intention with the movement and the community and connection with beliefs, that's where real change can take place. So I love kind of the practical application. I love that we can sort of reinforce even this work as it pertains to just moving your body and getting your like a lot of our movements are rooted in like a proper posture and but I really hope people take the time to look this work up, because I think that it is so impactful. And I'll end with this, because there is a sign in your office that I think about all the time. And I'm not going to get it right, and I don't know if you've memorized it, but the sign that says like the myth about healing. Do you remember that one?
We have several different ones, so I don't know which one is up.
It says like the myth about healing is that it's really hard. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of force, right? And all of the work that you do is through ease. I mean, that's what the sign says, basically. Like there's this myth about healing that
healing
it has
myths,
to,
magic,
it has to look like this. Force, difficulty, da-da-da-da-da. And it's like your work is a true testament of the ease that can come, because essentially the myth of healing is just a belief that needs to be deconstructed. Healing can happen in different ways. And so I just I think about that quote a lot, that anytime I'm like, oh, it's going to be so hard, I'm like, is it? Like, or you just like have that belief. So I'm so grateful that you joined us today. You've obviously impacted many of our lives.
This was a great PEGcast.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I got to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I appreciate all you all said, too. It's really helpful to hear your stories, for me, too. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, hopefully we can have Peg back again one day, because I know we'll get questions from this. So, Nina, remind everybody about the email they can check in.
Please email us at podcast@weshape.com. We check it. We respond. We'd love to hear from you. We can answer questions if you're like, hey, what were you talking about? And we'll be there and answer your questions.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Peg, and we'll see everyone next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.